Telstra virtual event. I'm Justin Cleveland, and today we're talking about retail, how to create value with your customers, and how to differentiate yourself in a very complex marketplace. We have retail and transportation experts here in studio with us. We'll introduce them in just a second, but first I want to tell you what you can do with the Telstra virtual events platform. Feel free to resize and move around the boxes as you see fit. There's a lot of information and data coming in the slide pack, so I'd recommend that you make that a little bit bigger. You can also ask us a question, and a lot of our conversation is going to be driven by your questions and comments, so feel free to submit that there on the question box on your screen. Also, if you want to download a copy of this presentation, you'll find it in the Resources tab there on your screen as well. So let's go around the room and introduce those who are joining us today. First of all, joining me on my right is Gareth Jude. He is the Retail Industry Executive for Telstra. Welcome in, Gareth.
Thanks, Justin.
And to his right is Charlie McDonald, the Transportation and Manufacturing Industry Executive here at Telstra.
Thank you.
And I'm Justin Cleveland, and I'm your host here today. So let us jump into the topic, first of all, by asking you in the audience a question, and that is, do you offer stock availability information online? Yes, in real time. Yes, regularly updated, say daily. Yes, but it's not reliable, or no, you don't. And while those results tabulate, I want to talk to you, Gareth, first of all, and say thank you for joining us. And second of all, what brings you to Telstra, and what's a little bit of your retail background?
So, Justin, thanks. I've been here at Telstra about 4 years, but I'm a career retailer, career shopkeeper. I came to Telstra because I could see the world changing. I could see the world of retail going digital. I thought this would be an interesting place to be, and it certainly has been over the last 4 years.
Excellent. And Charlie, I want to ask you pretty much the same question. What brings you to Telstra, and what were you doing before?
Well, let me start off. Thank you, Justin. I've been working in the express logistics industry since the mid-80s. I worked in Europe and Southeast Asia, and came to Australia in 2004. The business I was working for was sold three and a bit years ago, and I got the opportunity to join Telstra. Actually, there's a bit of an online story, a LinkedIn story there, but we won't go into that today. So I've been in the role about 3.5 years now.
Great. I actually do want to pick your brain on that someday, so we'll get to that in just a bit. But first, let's look at your results. Do you offer stock availability information online? 50% of you saying no, that you don't, and I think that is an important thing to do. In fact, I worked in a retail business about 7 years ago now, and one of the things that we had just started to do was offering those online stock availabilities. They weren't always reliable. And Gareth, as we jump in, actually, would you say that unreliable stock information is worse than having no stock information?
Well, there's things you can do around that, Justin, but it is a pretty bad thing. I think the worst thing you can do is have no stock information.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because then a customer comes to you expecting stock and it isn't there, and they've made that decision based on nothing. When I first went online with stock information, we just gave an in-stock, out-of-stock flag, and we had a degree of freedom around that. So we actually said out of stock when our levels got down to, say, 2 or 3.
Right, just in case.
Yeah, just in case. But in stock, and it was a huge advantage because people respected that we weren't wasting the time before they came to the store.
Yeah. So let's jump into the topic today. Now, it's based off of white paper. You can download a copy of that white paper through a link we'll give you in just a minute. But let's jump through and talk through what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a paper that Charlie and myself wrote called Personal Supply Chain. And we'll talk a little bit about supply chain management as a concept. We'll talk about the research. We'll talk about this concept of co-creating value with the consumer. And finally, what our view of what you need to succeed in this new world. So if we look at the next slide. Supply chain management, it's not such an old concept. I can remember when this came into fruition. It was about 30 years ago, I'd say. This came into the world of retail. And it was a new idea at the time. It's the idea by collaborating with your customer, or you can create more value than simply concentrating on your own business and having a bit of a confrontational negotiation. So,
because that's what it was like to start with, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. So I started in retail in the early 70s when I was at school, and it wasn't a good negotiation for our buyers unless the supplier was in a pool of blood on the floor, and vice versa. Everybody was trying to trick everybody else, and the result for our business was massive inefficiency in stock management. I worked in this hardware store. I was at school. It was about 1,000 square metres, which was big for the time, but 75% of the space was occupied by safety stock because we had no idea what we were ordering. We were getting tricked into ordering and, you know, all the other things. So supply chain management was a revolutionary concept. This idea that you could collaborate with your suppliers and create more value by doing that. And it was a big leap of faith for retailers and manufacturers to do that. So if we look at the next slide, we can see what retail used to be like. Value was created in pillars. So we had the manufacturers, we had the wholesalers, the retailers, all creating value for themselves and the consumers out there, but it was very inefficient, as I said before. Now, to be fair to retailers of the time, there weren't really the platforms to collaborate on in those days. No computers, no fax, no internet, no...
You were lucky to have a telephone, weren't you?
Well, we had a telephone. And we had a franking machine. I think that was the only other bit of communications or automation we had. But, you know, if we weren't getting on with a supplier, we'd write them a stern letter, put it through the franking machine, and, you know, we'd get a reply back in a week's time. So it wasn't like having an online platform to collaborate on. And as soon as those became available, retailers did start to collaborate with manufacturers. And the next slide, Justin, shows you what that world looked like. So the famous first example of this is Walmart and Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble were involved in the baby diaper category with Walmart, but notice that their sales were performing very much in a sawtooth manner.
Yeah.
And Procter & Gamble couldn't understand that because baby diapers should perform in a pretty stable manner. The demand for baby diapers from babies is pretty constant. So they dug into this and they said to Walmart, look, how about we take care of supplying your stores because we're seeing out of stocks, we're seeing overstocks, we think we can control this supply better. And Walmart did agree to give them the brand new live feeds of stock information in return for Procter & Gamble taking over the replenishment function, what we now call vendor managed inventory.
VMI, remember it well.
And the quid pro quo from Walmart is they only paid when a good was scanned as sold. So there was no 30-day terms. It was we will effectively only pay when scanned as sold. Massive success, still going 30 years later. And if you turn the clock forward to today, if you go to a big supermarket chains in Australia, you'll find up to 300 supplier representatives with desks in the office of that retailer.
Embedded in the
business.
Yeah.
And so collaboration now is an embedded part of retail. So if we go to the next slide. What we propose in this paper is that the technology that made the Walmart Procter & Gamble collaboration possible is now available to consumers, and that consumers are viable members of the supply chain circle. Before, you would have seen in that previous slide, the consumer was still on the outside, a receiver of value, but a passive receiver of value. We're saying they can be an active collaborator in the creation of value now in the supply chain. So next one, Justin. Now, so we did some research, and this is the third piece of research we've done under this idea of the mobile-enabled consumer. So we've done a paper on Omnichannel, we did a paper on the importance of mobility in retail, and this is the third of the series. So we've been tracking the behaviour of consumers with their mobile devices for some time. And on this slide, what you can see is just some highlights out of the research that show all those behaviours are increasing. So using out your mobile to find information about a retailer, comparing prices online. When you're in the store of a retailer, that's called showrooming. Making a purchase on a phone, making a purchase on a tablet, or scanning a barcode to get more information. It's all going up. And in the next slide, Justin, you'll see it's not limited to the Gen Yers. Now, when we first started telling the story, it was very much a Gen Y story. Look after these guys, they're your customers of the future.
Because they're going to grow older, aren't they?
They're going to grow older. But you can see there's a demographic group at the right-hand side of the slide that you and I are very attached to that's really getting hold of this thing. It's the 30-39 age group, Justin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, it's the baby boomers, and the baby boomers are embracing this technology faster than anybody right now, which means it's no longer about demographic groups. Everybody's into this now. Everybody is using their mobile device to help them in the shopping process.
You know, I think about my parents who are in their 60s and retired and have the tablets and have just gotten their first smartphone, not because they want the technology, but because it is useful for them as, sorry, Mom, faculties go down, that it has the ability to talk and it can give them the response that they need. So there's
change the font size.
Yes, you can make it big and very simple technology. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So next one, Justin. Now, what we're interested in doing in this paper is researching how all this affects the supply chain. This is a complicated slide. It's much easier to see if you download the paper or you download this presentation. But I'll just talk you through it. So for each question along the bottom of the slide, we've got 3 bars. The first bar is the consumer response to the question. So the first one is ability to return goods to a physical location. 86% of consumers would find that very useful.
Wait, so if I buy something online, I can just go, if I buy it from JB Hi-Fi, I can just take it back to a JB Hi-Fi store.
That's right. The next 2 columns show retailers' provision of services relating to that requirement. So in the case of that particular requirement, 60% of SMEs provide that and 73% of large retailers provide that facility. But next slide will show you where some of the gaps are. There are some big gaps. So here we have highlighted a few gaps. And
that first one is referring to our first question, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is, yeah. So the first big gap is on stock availability information. Still, the vast majority of retailers aren't providing that, but the overwhelming majority of consumers really want it.
So can you talk me through, so why does a consumer need, in this omnichannel world, live inventory information?
Well, I think the short answer is they're used to it from their online experiences. So when you go to order something from Amazon or eBay or wherever it may be, you can see the stock availability information. When you go to a retail store, you're taking a chance. I think the expectation is now that the physical retailer will give you the courtesy of telling you if they actually do have stock to sell you before you get in the car and make the trip there. It's become an expectation. That's certainly the driver of the companies who've gone into RFID technology. So the big headline example is Macy's in the US. They've gone on a massive RFID program, and they will publicly say it's all about omnichannel. Our customers expect us to tell them what stock we have before they make the journey to the store.
So is there a direct correlation between in-store inventory accuracy with sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did something similar in my career at one of the retailers I was with in the past. We did it in a manual way, but we found that every store that we, how do we put this, that we assured the accuracy of the stock in, our sales went up 10%, but our inventory also went down 10%. That was the rough equation. And that's the rough numbers that people who've installed RFID are experiencing.
Is there one, can I just ask you a couple more questions on it? Is there one sector, is it the apparel sector that's leading this in-store inventory accuracy? I mean, you mentioned Macy's, and Macy's has a wide variety of commodities, doesn't it?
Yeah. So yes, definitely the apparel sector has led it, but not only apparel. So the first cab off the rank was Walmart. Walmart.
That's right.
A huge in RFID. They set up an RFID institute at the University of Arkansas, and they have now got on board most of their China suppliers, including Li Feng, with tagging and being in the RFID loop, so their whole supply chain is visible to them and the retail part of the consumer. So yes, apparel, department stores, but also discount department stores like Walmart. And we think, or we're told, 20 out of the 30 biggest retailers in the world, including the likes of Tesco, have got RFID plans in place.
What about, I mean, there's an entry cost for that, and also turning over your systems.
Yep.
What can a retailer, particularly an SME, look at for an entry level cost? I mean, what's it going to take to get it done?
Yeah, well, there are a number of moving parts here. So there's software, there's scanners, there's tags, which are consumables. You need to replace them. The tags have come down a lot in cost over the years, so they're probably under 10 cents now. The tags you need to put on garments. But the setup will depend on the retailer. And so far in Australia, there really aren't any RFID sites that are certainly landmark sites anyway. And it's an area we're interested in exploring with retailers. We have a couple of exploratory conversations on at the moment.
So as this expands, do you see the cost of entry going down?
Yeah, absolutely. The technology is mature now. And Charlie reminds me occasionally that we've heard of RFID for at least a decade.
Yeah. 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And it sort of came with all the promise that it now has 15 years ago, let's say, and just fizzled out for about 5. Because really, when we look back on it, we think the technology just wasn't mature then, and it was quite costly.
And it was kind of technology looking for a problem. And if you're going to replace a barcode label, which was ingrained in the process, with an extra 20 cents, an extra 30 cents an item, the business case has to be clear, and it has to have a very, very good understanding of that. But I think the world is changing. We'll talk a bit about it later.
So that was gaps, and there were a number of gaps here, but this one is more important, because it's all right to say there are gaps between what consumers want and what retailers deliver, but will they pay for it? And you see here the gaps are even bigger. So we can see once again a number of things that consumers think are important, but we've asked them a further question, would you pay for it if it was available? So on the first one there, 62% are saying they'd pay for guaranteed, or a premium for guaranteed same-day delivery, but only 9% and 4% of retailers are delivering. Next one is being able to customise product online to your requirements. 57% of consumers would pay extra for that, but only 2 and 6% of consumers, of retailers are providing it. So big gaps, not only in the services required or desired and delivered, but bigger gaps between the services customers would pay a premium for and those being delivered by retailers.
This goes back to this value equation. We've for far too long been taking a view of this challenge as being purely a cost-driven exercise, isn't it?
It's interesting coming from the States where when the internet retail boom happened, we got spoiled by free shipping, and now if free shipping isn't included, it's almost it's a negative against the vendor, which I don't think is a good thing. But it's interesting here saying, we've got people saying, yes, I'd be willing to pay a little bit extra if you could tell me what day it's coming on, or tell me what time I have to be home to pick up this big purchase that I've made from you. I think that's almost a universal. You want the ability to interact with the thing that you're buying.
Yeah. So, and I think we had this in retail in the 90s, quite frankly. Every retailer in the 90s said, we're the cheapest, we will not be beaten. We are the, never knowingly undersold, all those slogans. And then Apple came along, and Apple are never oversold, are they? They're always the most expensive. But they've built this fantastic retail model based on the concept of utility. The utility they offer being much more important than the price they charge. And that's been a revelation for a lot of retailers, I think. But the same mentality hasn't reached the supply chain yet. The supply chain is still in this cost-based view of value, and they're not seeing the differentiation possibilities from utility. And Charlie will talk a bit about that later.
So I do have another question for you in the audience, and that is, how important is customizability to your customers? Your business is completely bespoke. You see customizing as a value add. There is limited customizability in your business, or your products and services are standard offerings. While those results tabulate, I want to turn into the consumers being prepared to collaborate if offered the savings. And you say that there was the race to the bottom in retail and just not making a profit. What kind of savings? I mean, is there a line in there for how much we have to offer for customers to be interested?
Okay, so let's break that one down a bit. So previously what we've seen is customers prepared to pay a premium for extra utility. But on the other side of the equation, consumers are also prepared to collaborate with you, in other words, do some of the work of the supply chain if you offer them some sort of benefit. And I've got a few on this slide which say pay in advance, pick up goods from a depot, provide design suggestions to manufacturers. As a retailer myself and as a merchant myself, these were all things I was doing with my suppliers in the 90s and early parts of the 2000s. if, for example, I paid in advance for a shipment, which I often did through letter of credit to China,
Sure.
I'd expect some sort of exclusivity on the product, or at the least a very, very good price. Picking up goods from a depot or a retail locker, the analogy there is with me saying, look, you don't need to deliver those goods, Mr. Supplier. Send it to my DC. I'll deliver them for you, but I want to benefit. I was happy to give design suggestions to manufacturers for a benefit, for exclusivity or a price benefit, or a really big one for us in the early part of this century was giving sales information. Suppliers really wanted to know about, my consumption information or my sales information. Consumers are saying the same thing now. I'll give you my consumption information, but I want to benefit. So all these things on this slide are things consumers are prepared to collaborate with retailers on, but they want a tangible benefit in the same way that retailers want a tangible benefit from their suppliers for collaborating.
Well, I mean, we've seen how customers and consumers are willing to give over a lot of personal information for the perceived value of the rewards card. I frankly do it a lot, and I'm happy if I get a toaster after 3 or 4 years for giving you all of the information about where I'm shopping, when I'm shopping, and what I'm buying. So I think it's clear, but then how do you maximize that, and how do you know, what to offer the customer to get them to do?
So I think that's another piece of research. There's got to be some choice-based modelling on this by sector of what are going to be the key hot buttons for your particular business. But I think the principle behind it is engagement, because if you're involving somebody in collaborating with you to create value, you become a much stickier customer.
And going back to that Walmart story, that collaboration in the supply chain is based on, yes, systems, yes, processes, but there's a lot of trust in here, isn't it? And this co-creation of value that we did in the 90s and the early noughties from a B2B perspective is exactly what we're doing now in this B2C world. And there's a continuing story here.
So let's jump into the business out rewarding collaborative customers. So what are we seeing in the marketplace, and why aren't we doing it?
Yeah, well, I think it's this idea of cost-based value again. So look at the first one, pay in advance. Consumers are saying 87%, yeah, I'd do that for a benefit, but only 12 and 13 are providing that. But there are examples of people doing it, and I'll give you two. One is Kogan Electronics. Kogan Electronics, you pay in advance for the goods you buy on the internet, but you get a really, really good price. And Kogan, through that effectively consumer funding of their business, has managed to stay debt-free and be a very efficient and low-cost operating business, and in turn provide those savings as well under their customers. Naked Wines has the same business model, so they have subscribers, angels as they call them. You pay a monthly fee. You effectively become a cohort of the manufacturer, and you're getting wines at manufactured prices through Naked Wines. And Naked Wines, I've seen them speak a number of times, they say it's actually impossible to make a bottle of wine in Australia that costs more than $15. So you're getting great wines at really good prices. And you can download the report and read the rest of these examples. But this is probably the biggest area of opportunity, the opportunity to get your consumers to actually do work for you in the supply chain, make them stickier and make them happier, because that's what they want to do.
Yeah, and they will be more likely to come back if they get a good experience, which drives us into the delivery aspect and the supply chain aspect of all of this. There's a question that's up on the screen now, which is, have you ever had something go wrong with an online delivery? Charlie, yes or no?
Well, Justin, it would be interesting to ask the audience if they've had that experience as well. What our survey and what our research said is 1 in 2, basically 50% of Australians have had an issue. And this is an extraordinary statistic. No one would run their business at 50% failure rate, would they? And what's interesting about this is...
I want to take a step back, which is, how do you define problem? Is it just that you weren't home when they tried to deliver, which happens? Usually you get carded and you have to go pick it up somewhere. Or is it, crushed box? Is it broken, damaged item? How do you define problem?
So our survey didn't actually go down to that granularity. Okay. We just, we asked the survey responders about did they have an issue with delivery. The vast majority is this issue about futile delivery, this not home, this left card.
Yeah, and it's annoying, but not the end of the world, usually.
Right. Now, well, let's roll this forward and let's talk a bit about what this service really means. I mean, this is the challenge, isn't it? Gareth has been talking about what retailers are doing. I really want to sort of take a view of what the transport and logistics operators are doing. The slide that's showing us now is really saying, I can sum it up in one sentence. If you have a failed delivery and you do not recover that service, the shopper will not shop with you again. The brand we were having a discussion before we came on air. The brand that's impacted here is the retailer brand. It's the brand of whatever product you are buying, not necessarily the brand of the transport organisation. Now, they may well be damaged, but Telstra, we have an example of if we're selling one of these online, and this phone is the same phone as our competitors. The only human that our customer is going to interact with will be the delivery organisation. So that experience is absolutely essential about protection of our brand and how our customers react with our services. So, when we talk to retailers and when we talk to manufacturers, the plea that comes out of there is quite compelling. They're asking the transport and logistics sector to care about our product as much as we do. Now, I'll tell you a bit of an innovation story around here. That makes common sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Care about my product as much as we do. How do you measure that? Well, we have an Australian transport organisation who goes up and down our streets every day in red-coloured vans, working with an online bookseller who is able now to create customer satisfaction information on each transaction. So they have, many of the audience may know about our Net Promoter Score, and Net Promoter Score is a way of measuring customer satisfaction as well as advocates. So the transport organisation now is telling their customer, the retailer, how their customers are satisfied with their service, which I think is gold. I think that is you're now talking about real value in that delivery service. I bet it's changed the conversation from just price.
Yeah.
Hey, there will be a price conversation, right? But it won't be just price.
Yeah. I think it was interesting, we talked about this a bit earlier, but my perception of the role of the transport and logistics company is very different because of where I come from.
Sure.
In America, we look at, because they are institutional, FedEx, UPS, and the U.S. Postal Service, as being responsible for the delivery. So if I get something lost in the mail, it's not Best Buy's fault. It's UPS's fault for losing that item. And that's not the case here in Australia.
No, it's not. And we were slightly surprised that this is what our survey has said. So, the respondents are telling us that it's the original brand that's being impacted. And I've heard that consistently from other surveys. That may well change. And I think that, because consumers are going to be better informed, because consumers' expectations seem to be have an exponential growth on services. Look, and let's talk a bit about, so good, we've got this slide up. What we really wanted to do is just show, we've touched a bit about how RFID has been introduced into supply chains. But if we look back the last 20, 30 years, we've moved on. For a lot of the most part, there's the good old barcode and label, but sensors and the Internet of Things and the connectivity of supply chains is becoming ever more important. Gareth has already given us a very clear understanding about why in-store inventory accuracy is important. And it isn't now, it's you're picking to person, it's that pick to person, and that's all tracking that all the way through. So our expectation, the expectation of the consumer is now heightened, and of course the technology is changing. Sensors, real-time sensors with more than just location. So, you know, tracking things like temperature, tracking things like humidity. And for high-value goods, ensuring security. So there are sensors out there that can alert someone if a package has been opened, alert somewhere if there's an unusual light event. And this is now commonplace, and many supply chains are adopting this type of technology.
It's interesting when you talk about that, because I'm thinking about, in terms of stock management, the ability to track. I bought something a while ago, and it went from Madison, Wisconsin, to Knoxville, Kentucky, to New York, and then back up to Green Bay, Wisconsin, which, you know, seemed like a circuitous route. And honestly, as long as it arrived in shape, it didn't matter where it went. But I'm still, you know, F5 refreshing constantly on that page, because it's just, there's some security in knowing. And I think that's very valuable just from a consumer security perspective.
Well, the big integrators have had online track and trace since the internet was born, and that was their big differentiation. And they were able to, the integrators of the FedEx, the UPS, the DHLs, the TNTs. So the big international integrators have introduced track and trace. You know, Fred Smith from FedEx said in the late 70s, if you can't tell the sender that the package has been delivered, don't deliver the package. Right. You know, so that's, you know, what was 45 years ago. So, look, we've kind of sort of, that is now institutionalized. I think this real time, especially around last mile. And I think if you flip over to the next slide, we can talk a bit about. Let's talk. If you can just tap the slide again.
Yeah.
What I wanted to show on this is the difference between a business to business and a business to consumer. In a business to business world, you know, we're delivering to locations which are normally manned in office hours. We're delivering to places where we can get delivery density, pickup density, so we've got lower unit costs. We're delivering to places which are known, so we've got routes which we understand.
Yeah.
In our new consumer world, we're going to residential addresses which we haven't been to. Our problem with residential addresses is people are not home. And so we've
got a very frustrating experience with a wine trying to be delivered, and it's a couple of $100s of wine. It's not something I just want left out on the street. And they said, well, can't you just be home 9 to 5 every day until we deliver it? No, guys, I work. You know, this is part of the problem, and this is going to continue to be a problem.
Yeah, and of course, what our survey is saying is consumers are demanding choice. And so the transport and logistics business response is to try and re-engineer a B2C delivery to have the same attributes of a B2B. So let's look at, you know, a click and collect or a locker. So, you know, a parcel locker enables you to have that 24-hour delivery. It allows you to have that same type of delivery density. And yes, Australia Post are in the process of rolling out their red lockers. In fact, the locker at 242 Exhibition is has one of the largest throughputs of their network in the Telstra facility in Melbourne, which of course is relieving our mailroom from any online deliveries.
Yeah.
But locker technology is interesting. There is innovation going on even just at the locker technology. In Singapore, there's an Australian vendor called TZ who are deploying the Singapore Post POP stations, and they've put the internet connectivity actually on the lock.
Oh.
So instead of going up to a locker and keying in a code and the door opens, you can go up there and scan your phone and open the locker.
Just the same as the Apple Pay, sort of whatever that
NFC type connections. That's step one. Step two, which I think is really interesting, is open and pay. And you talked about prepay. This is now recreating that retail experience, so you can now open and you'll pay when you open.
Sure.
So I think that's a really interesting innovation. But you know, every day we see news about drone delivery. We've got businesses like DHL trialing deliveries to car boots. I think they're doing this in Sweden and in Germany with Audi and Volvo. So you know, expect more. There is an Australian business called Flirty who are trialling drone deliveries in New Zealand. I'm not sure if the drone delivery is going to be for everyone, but there may be specific use cases there that makes absolute sense. But because this is the biggest challenge to the industry, this is where the vortex of innovation is going on. There's a real buzz going on how can we address this?
Yeah. I'll be frank, if I have a headache and a drone shows up with some Nurofen, I am a happy man. So if somebody wants to present that idea with me, I'm very happy to go in on that.
Good on you. We can have you as our first test user.
But I actually this just came to mind. You're describing is like the automat of the 20s, 30s, 40s. You know, you go in, you put in your dime, and you get your food. We've sort of come full circle to this idea of you don't pay until you have the thing in your hand.
Well, a parcel locker is very much like a left luggage locker. And expect at your railway station close to you, like we're seeing in Transport for London, lockers being deployed so that you can shop while you're in the office, and on your way home at your final station you'll be able to pick your goods up from the locker and walk home. And yes, is this new? Well, not really. We've probably seen this stuff many times in our lives.
It was a great idea that just wasn't quite ready yet, and it looks like we're getting to the technological point where we can handle it.
So this is interesting. So this is the, Gareth and I'm the interface between that cyber physical. So this is when we get physical. This is when we have to deliver, unless we 3D print in someone's home. But that's probably not for this.
That's another disruption that we do have to watch for, though.
Absolutely, and that's maybe worth a full series on its own. We believe, of course, the big disrupting thing is the smartphone, and this is the platform to collaborate on. And it's interesting that the power we have now in our hip pocket is probably equivalent to those ERP systems that were rolled out in the 80s and 90s, and there's been some phenomenal growth in not just consumer activity, but I also believe the transport and logistics industry has to embrace this technology as well. We were talking before we came on air about Singles Day in China last year. It's been going for 3 or 4 years. Alibaba's big fire sale, 11/11. I was at a presentation in Singapore a couple of months ago, and someone had a clock on the sales, and it started at midnight. And do you know the first billion was made? First billion was like 17 minutes past. They reached the 2013 volume, which was about 4 billion. So the previous year's volume was made by 7 o'clock. And what was the number at the end?
9 point something.
9 point something billion in one day.
Wow. And this is just through Alibaba?
Just through Alibaba and their community.
Wow.
40%, was it 40% of transactions?
No, it was over 50% of the transactions were on mobile devices.
Ah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's not even a question that the smartphone is the key.
No.
It's already here.
No.
And it's very analogous with what happened in the 80s. The internet came along, people could collaborate now. They could be in real time with each other online. Now the consumer's got the same capacity with their smartphone.
Yeah. So then I've got a question for you in the audience, which is, do you connect with customers through mobile devices? Yes, we have a mobile optimized website. Yes, we have an app. Yes, our store or stores are listed on, say, Google Maps with hours, details. Yes, we offer, say, price matching to competitor websites if somebody comes in and shows you the phone, or no. So while those results tabulate, so maybe I want to start on this journey toward getting my business ready for mobile. What's the most important part, would you say?
Well, Justin, why don't you tap down a few slides, because we've got a slide that kind of summarises it. So we'll go past there. We'll go over 4 or 5 slides down. Keep going. Keep going.
They'll be able to get access to this.
Yes.
Yes, you'll have the full document.
This is all my content. You just skip over it, mate. Don't worry about it.
There we go.
Okay, so here we go. And so how do people get into this? We think there's 2 real pillars to this. The first is providing a communications platform, as Charlie's just saying, and that platform will invariably be a mobile device. What does that mean? Well, if you're a retailer or a transport company, you need apps, and you need apps that are distributable over multiple platforms.
Yep.
When supply chain management first came in, Charlie may have been at these meetings, but I certainly went to them, where the retailer brought their suppliers in and said, here's our EDI method of dealing with you now. You will subscribe to our system or you won't be a supplier anymore. You can get away with that in the business-to-business world. You can't get away with it in consumer land.
No.
So you've got to provide a facility for the consumer to get your app no matter what the device is that they use. We advocate something called the Instant app, which is a browser-based app which allows customers to engage with you in a frictionless manner. They don't have to have the app pre-downloaded, so that's an adjunct to the previous point. When you need to send a message to a customer, not everybody likes text messages, not everybody likes robotic voice messages, not everybody likes email, but everybody likes something. So we think it's important to find out what method of communication your consumer likes and
give them the option.
Give them the option.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of this is going to involve video content, so you need to have a system that's going to allow video content across all the different platforms.
And it has to be good, because the minute you give someone bad video or a bad experience, again, you're just taking a step back.
Yeah, and talk to Telstra about all those things. We've got products that can do all of that stuff for you. So communication is the first part. The second part is engaging, because it's one thing to have a platform. It's one thing to have the internet, going back to the 80s and 90s. But if there's nothing of relevance on there, then nobody will connect. In fact, story time. I saw a demonstration of the internet in 1982, 83 over here at Sydney University. A guy from Acorn Computers came out. I'm just going to check my messages. I'll connect with the server back in the UK. Wow, this was incredible. It was there for a long time, but only came to life when there was content that engaged, and in a business sense, engaging content allowed collaboration. The next part about engagement is the analytics. So having the ability to analyze those interactions and take meaningful action on them is going to be really important, because then you can make the experience better next time. And finally, a social media strategy, because I think, Charlie, it doesn't matter what you're in, retail or transport, that's where the conversation is today. Have you got
no, absolutely. And actually, this isn't just about brand protection. And it isn't just about brand monitoring. I'd strongly recommend, and there's some good examples of people using social media to actually make their make their processes more efficient. I mean, for example, if you can't deliver to someone, can you deliver them to a friend? How do you find a friend? Facebook.
And frankly, wherever I go, whether it be to rave or to rage, it's going to be on social media, and I'm going to be on their website, and I'm going to be tagging, or on their page, I'm going to be tagging them, and I'm going to be either exuberantly happy or really, really mad. So you need to have a strategy for dealing with those people one way or another.
But we have these platforms now that can allow us to collaborate. I'm from an industry that frankly used to block the sites from the employees. We might have had an external view, but this was seen as an enemy in productivity, not a tool for work. I think this is absolutely, in 2015, fundamental to a lot of what you want to do in terms of collaborating and engaging, as you're saying.
So there's a lot of collaboration, and we did skim through, Charlie, some of your slides. But good news, we're going to be catching up with you on Friday. We'll be talking about this in a little bit of depth. We'll send out information to that for you for attendees. But just with a couple of minutes here left, I want to go around the room and say, I mean, if we take away nothing else, what's the most important piece to think about with the personal supply chain? And Gareth, I'll start on you.
Well, this is another iteration of the customer being in charge. So we've heard this in retail for the past few years. Never forget, it's the customer that's really in charge of your business now. You're not. And now we're seeing it firmly entrenched in the world of supply chain.
That's fascinating. We think about the customer. I mean, honestly, we're just facilitating a transaction in most cases, unless we're the constructor of the material too. Yeah. Charlie, what would you take out?
So from a transport and logistics perspective, the world has just gone 180 degrees. Our relationships traditionally has been with the sender. We haven't really understood the receiver's requirements. So now the receiver is dictating the service, the consumer, not our paying customer who we've had the relationship with. My takeout from this is A, that 180 degrees change, and the consumer is demanding choice. Give them the choice.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult conversation with those who have been in the business for 40 years and may have the legacy business, but I think it's an important conversation to have.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Great. So thank you to our guests, Gareth Jude and Charlie McDonald, for taking a few minutes and talking it through. You'll see on your screen a link where you can download a copy of this presentation. Also feel free, download a copy of the white paper. You can also download a copy of this presentation there on the resources tab on your screen. Highly recommend as you go through. There are a lot of learnings and a lot of information in here. And of course, if you have questions on any of this, just reach out and ask. The contact information for these fine gentlemen is up on social media as well. Connect through LinkedIn, connect through email. However, there are a lot of things to talk about here as well. So thank you for joining us here today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them into the box on your screen and we will get around to them. In just a moment, a survey is going to pop up. Let us know how we did and what we can do for you in the future. Any topics you'd like to hear about, please feel free to let us know. I'm Justin Cleveland, joining you today from the CIC Studio T, 400 George Street in Sydney. This has been a Telstra virtual event.